Welcome back and thanks for tuning in. So this video is going to be a little bit of a different format than you're used to. The reason why I'm doing this is just to kind of give you an update on how things went yesterday with our test pilot coming here and giving us an evaluation of the aircraft, and also to tell you, the implications of, his findings and where that's going to take us next. So, just to, break it to you right away, there wasn't any great news from his visit yesterday. There's all, a few problems that are definitely showstoppers at this point. So I'm going to give you a rundown on that, and then I'll tell you kind of like what I think is going to happen going forward right now, and just so you guys are all up to speed on what's happening, and you don't have to wonder, oh, what's going on, Anyway, so to break it down, after spending 10 hours here yesterday with Len, and going through pretty much, well, most things anyway, his final evaluation was there was 3 red flags that he has with the aircraft before he would fly it. The first 2 being aerodynamic, and the third one to do with the engine. So just to give you a breakdown of the aerodynamic ones, he has a concern with the winglet that you can see out there. And if you remember back, if you've been following the series, you'll remember when we were flying the model that we had a problem with Dutch roll, where it was sort of doing this when it got slow. And mainly, we were concerned that the wider fuselage had caused that problem. And normally to fix that problem, you just need better stability that generally comes from, enlarging your tail area. And, being a canard aircraft, we did basically made those bigger. And we did it on the model, and we also put the strake fences on there. Oh, not the strake fences, the winglet fences on there, down underneath there. I'm trying to point to it. And on the model, that solved the problem. It flew great after that, and you can actually look back and see the video of that flying, and you can see how Jeff was taking it into a bank like that, and it would stay in the bank, and take it into a bank the other way, it would stay in the bank, and then when it was tracking, it wasn't doing this at all, wasn't yawing, it was basically just flying nice and straight. And then even when we got it slow, it wasn't doing the Dutch roll problem anymore. It was it was nice and stable when it was slow. So on the model it fixed the problem. We didn't see any adverse effects from that on the model, but Len's concern is that the winglets are much larger than what you would traditionally have on a canard aircraft like this, and his concern is that they're going to create possibly a little bit of flutter type effect or something like that, which may translate into the wing and have the wing sort of get a harmonic type thing going on there. And of course that would, with the ailerons, that they would move independent, and so you get this whole sort of weird motion going on there, which could cause a big problem. So what his solution for that is, it needs to be something that an independent aerodynamic engineer can look at and determine whether or not there is a problem or a potential problem there. And even when we increased the size on those, Mark did the full re-engineering of the wing in terms of making sure that the wing can handle the loads of that, and he did his analysis on that. But I guess Len wants like a second opinion on that, and I'm okay with that. But it's one of those things, when you have to go and find another aerodynamic engineer to go and do an evaluation like that, you're going to have to bring them up to speed, and first of all find someone who has time to do that, and then bring them up to speed on the project, and see if they can provide any information that's going to make someone like Len feel comfortable that there's not going to be some weird problem that happens right after takeoff. So that's just the fact that the timing issue on that. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I don't think we're going to make Oshkosh with the aircraft. I was hoping to get there, but that was based upon everything going fairly smoothly with what we still had left to do. So given that we've got at least, I don't even know how long it would take to bring somebody in to get that evaluation done, but ultimately probably needs to be done. So I don't think we're going to make Oshkosh this year. It's a real shame, but I don't want to kill anybody either, so just got to be realistic with how long things take. And I had a very good reason for enlarging that winglet, and I stand by what we did, and it didn't do anything weird on the model, and maybe it has a problem and maybe it doesn't, but we need to find out, we need to prove it or something, or have some way of proving it before you all of a sudden just go from taking off down the runway and then airborne, and then all of a sudden you've got this problem that you don't know how to solve. So anyway, that's one problem. And then the second aerodynamic problem was with the elevator controls that we had, or the elevator that we had, the way we did the design. And if you remember, we had I'd originally done the design so the elevators went on the sort of flap tracks to move them. And the reason why I had done that was because I wanted to have a lot more lift available. So instead of just making a regular elevator that just pivots like this, I had made one that's more like a Fowler flap, because I wanted to have extra lift available for the potential later on of either adding flaps to the main wing, or to actually turn the ailerons into flaperons, where they work normally like this, but you could actually put some angle in them for slow speed, and then they would work like that. And in which case, if you did do that, they would only have two positions, just normally up or normally down. And in the case when they were normally down, you'd get extra travel on the elevator, so you'd be able to pull it further back. And in the case when they're up, you just wouldn't have that extra travel. And the extra travel would give you that extra lift that you would need to compensate for the fact that you're generating a lot more lift on the main wing. And so you at the same time that you deploy those, you need to be able to bring the nose back up again. Otherwise, you're going to get this pitch down effect that you're not going to have enough elevator authority to bring it up. So there was a good reason why I did that Fowler flap design. And Len's concern with it is that a Fowler flap has a sort of point as you start to deploy it, and it comes out, it opens up a gap, and you get like to a point where the flap becomes like super efficient and generates a ton of lift. And his concern is that you'd be flying it and you'd be pulling back to raise the nose, for whatever reason when you're flying, and all of a sudden you would get like this boost of lift, and the nose would come up sharply. And then the way that we have it designed right now, because we had to take out those sort of slots that we had it running on and just go to a regular hinge design, when we did that, we had to actually move up the hinge position closer to the actual bottom of the elevator than what it was initially at. And in doing so, it meant that the shape of the elevator compared to the cutout in the bottom of the foreplane didn't actually match very well. So where it was rotating, this sort of radius here didn't match here so well. So when it comes in like this, or when it actually deploys, the gap actually gets bigger, and when it closes up, the gap gets smaller. And that actually makes it makes it work okay. But the problem is we don't have as much, because it hits here when it gets to sort of about 12 or 13 degrees of up. It actually hits, and we really need like about 20 degrees of up. So his concern is that there's not enough down nose authority, that if you were all of a sudden had this problem of the elevator generating way too much lift, then you go to push it down, you don't have enough to compensate, so all of a sudden the aircraft wants to pitch up and you don't have enough authority to push it down. So again, he needs somebody, like a third party independent aerodynamic engineer to investigate the way we've done that, and just to be able to prove that the lift coefficients in both cases, all the way down and all the way up, are going to be enough to basically be able to control the aircraft in pitch. So that's a valid concern as well, and that's just something that we're going to have to do. And it's something that you can kind of feel out by being very careful when you're flying it on the test flight, and not putting in too much input. As long as you find that when you're doing high-speed taxi testing, that it's giving you the lift to get the nose off the ground at kind of where you're expecting it to do, and you're not going to have to put in big pitch control changes and stuff once you actually get it airborne. But again, he needs to have somebody independent of Mark, who basically worked with the design of what I'd sort of put together there, to do that. And other than that, what we would have to do is probably change the whole setup and just go with a traditional elevator like that. And that would mean just doing some work there to bolt onto, probably just sort of affix onto what we have already for those hangars, just change the pivot point there. Anyway, that's a whole other engineering job, which would take a while to do, at least several months work. to get that sorted out. It's not just an overnight fix. But anyway, so that's the two aerodynamic problems that Len has. And then to move on to the one with the engine. So, obviously it's an unproven engine in an aircraft. This is the first time anybody's tried to put an Audi, 3-litre diesel engine into an aircraft. And of course, so that's unproven, and we're running with a redrive that is our own design, and that's obviously unproven. But Len doesn't seem to have so much of a problem with that. But what he does have a problem with is the ECU that we're running, the Motec ECU, is just a single channel ECU, and there's no support for dual channel, like a dual channel FADEC that's available with some of these other engines that are out there. And other companies run in aircraft, they run FADEC, even Rotorway in their engines for their helicopters had a dual channel FADEC. I'm not sure that it ever worked very well, if the failsafe cuts over or whatever. But anyway, the point is, with the Motec ECU that I have, and I've researched it already, they just don't have any support for having two different ECUs running. And I didn't even know that's the sort of engineering that somebody in that company would have to sort of sit down and say, yeah, we're going to spend a year figuring out how you can put two of these next to each other, or maybe combine two of them into one box or whatever, and run all that circuitry in a fail-safe mode. So if one CPU just craps out, then the other one takes over. And likewise, you'd have to have dual power supplies and stuff in case the power goes out, to one that can switch to the other. And basically it's two different channels there where you'd be able to have two different power supplies feeding the two different sides of the ECU. So he's not happy with the fact that that's there, and that's just like a full-on red flag. He says, there's no way I'll fly it because of that. And so pretty much Len is out of the picture because of that. And I have a lot of confidence in that engine. I don't think for a minute there that the ECU is all of a sudden going to stop working, especially in the first few hours. Just if you're flying around the local pattern, there's absolutely no reason for it to stop working. I have the TCW backup battery that I've used on the avionics, and that is providing backup power to the ECU. So if for some reason the whole main battery power and the alternator and everything just completely craps out on the aircraft, that backup power will still keep the engine running long enough for you to get on the ground. But again, that's Len's not comfortable with that, and I asked him, I said, what do you think about other test pilots? What do you think their take was going to be on that? And he pretty much said that he thought that anybody or any test pilot who was kind of a decent test pilot, worth actually putting your time and your hard-earned efforts into testing your aircraft, that person will probably agree with him that they don't want to fly without a dual ECU. So at this point, I mean I'm going to reach out to some other test pilots there. Got some names of other people that are reputable, and see if they have the same the same mindset as Len. And if they do, I'm not sure where to go with this. And the reasoning for going with this engine, and in fact the choice of the engine is the reason why we're here right now. So if you go back to 2014, I think it was early 2014, when I came up with the idea for using the Audi engine. If you followed all the way back then, I had the website up, and I had come up with a design, and I had started out with the old engine that Rolls-Royce had made, the Allison engine, the 250. That was the original engine that I was going to put in this aircraft, a turboprop. And then when I found out that engine is like really hard to come by, super expensive to purchase, and really expensive to maintain, and it didn't actually have very good power ratings at high altitude, I just said, well, that's not a good choice then, because how are you going to be if you can't get an engine, and it's going to cost that much and all that sort of stuff. And at this point I hadn't even really thought about trying to make this whole aircraft an affordable option for people. It was just like, let's try and make an aircraft that fixes all the problems of all the other aircraft out there. And so anyway, scrapped that idea, and that was around the time that when I first found Jeff and was talking with Jeff about him getting involved with this and building this aircraft. So he sort of said, well, why don't you just put a Pratt & Whitney engine in there? And, you know, I knew that the Pratt & Whitney engine was a lot longer, and I would have to do, you know, a bunch of changes and stuff to the design. But again, at that point, it was just the design. It was all in CAD. So, you know, I went about doing that, and, you know, I had to sort of move the back bulkhead and, you know, bend it a little bit in order to get that engine in, and obviously I had to extend out the tail as well. And in fact, it ended up making the aircraft look better because it sort of stretched it out a little bit. It made it look a little sleeker, a little less egg-like. And so I was actually happy with how that came out. And then I put that up on the website, and that, you know, that engine became the choice. Oh, you're going to have a Pratt & Whitney engine in there. It's going to have 550 horsepower. This thing's going to be a rocket ship, you know. And so I just went about sort of doing it that way, but there wasn't a lot of interest because most people on there were like, oh, there's no way I can afford to build something like that. You know, it's basically going to be like a Lancer Evolution, you know, having to put a $500,000 engine in there and then to operate it, and if something happens to it, you have a prop strike or whatever like that, it's another 500 grand out the door. So, you know, most people were just like, oh, well, I'm not, you know, it's cool and all, but I can't afford it. And so at that point, you know, if there wasn't that much interest in there, you know, and it was kind of just going down the route of what the Evolution would be, I was just like, well, you know, what's the point? You're just basically making another aircraft that's a little bit different than other people, but if you really want to make a success, you have to stand out. You have to be like so much more different that, you know, people are going to look at you and say, well, you're a new company, yeah, and you don't have anything yet, but we believe in what you're doing, and we'll provide support and invest in what you're doing. And so anyway, I kept looking for different options, and I was talking to another guy over in Germany who was providing, you know, some inspiration for different things in the aircraft, and he sort of mentioned, excuse me, he mentioned that maybe we should put like a hybrid engine in there if you really want to stand out. And so he had put me onto this one that was like a diesel hybrid with an electric motor sort of bolted up to a diesel engine, a small 4-cylinder one. And I thought that, you know, that looked interesting, but it also brought along a whole bunch of problems and stuff with it as well, because you had to put batteries in and all that sort of stuff, you know, to supply electricity for the electric part of it. And that would just give you sort of, you know, a short amount of extra boost of power, you know, to take off and climb out, and then after that you'd just be on your diesel engine. And I thought, well, you know, that's a cool idea, but maybe we should just simplify it and just go with a straight diesel engine for now, and then maybe later on when better power plants become available that are hybrid, maybe we can switch to that and, you know, have like a full electric option, but with a little motor generating the power independently. So anyway, I started looking for diesel engines out there, and you know, it's very difficult when you start looking online to get specifications for engines. You want to find out the dimensions, how big is it, you know, and how much does it weigh, and what's the power output, and how, you know, how do you mount to it, and all those different things, and how do you control it, and what things does it need, and all that sort of stuff, and, you know, how are you going to, you know, provide cooling. I mean, it was just a lot of things, a lot of questions that need to be answered. And I found, after looking around for a little bit, I found the Audi engine. Of course, I drove an Audi at the time, and I still do. I have the same car, 19 years old now, and it's like a 19-year-old kid. It's a pain in the butt. Always asking for more money and just being, you know, not cooperating with me and giving me problems. So anyway, I had the Audi at the time, and I was like, oh, you know, I liked Audi. And so I found this engine, the 3-litre TDI engine, and I managed to find enough information about it that I found what the dimensions and stuff were, and it was actually going to fit in the back, you know, because even a Continental engine in this aircraft, if we had to put a 550 in here, you would have bulges in the cowling because of how sleek that I made the tail go into the prop, into where the spinner is. A Continental is a fairly wide engine, and if we had to switch this out and put a Continental in here, because of the way the weight and balance and everything is, and because of that sleekness, and because of how far the trailing edges of the wing are back, you would probably have to put a prop extension between the engine, the prop flange, and the prop itself, which, you know, that creates a whole nother set of problems in there, just to make that fit. Because otherwise, if you put the engine forward where you need it to be, so it's not too far back and it messes up your CG, then the prop would be basically hitting the trailing edges of the wings. And right now it doesn't do that because we've got the redrive in the middle there, and that, you know, pushes it all out. And also the redrive, because everything sort of tapers in, nothing bulges out of the cowling, so you get that nice smooth nice smooth fit around the engine. So anyway, back to the Audi engine. As soon as I put that up on the website, that's when I started to get a whole bunch of interest. All you guys out there were like, looking for something like this, a different aircraft out there. They were like, wow, diesel engine, cool. You can run jet fuel, cool. You can go and fly it anywhere in the world and not worry about, trying to track down 100 low lead. And you can save money because jet fuel was cheaper. It still is. And you wouldn't have any of the problems that you have with 100 low lead, and the diesel engine, the Audi diesel engine, the spec for it was 237 horsepower and I think 470 foot-pounds of torque or something like that. So it was a good power plant just to start with. And I knew full well that we would take the EGR off of it, and that would give you a little bit of a power boost and simplify the engine a little bit. And I knew there's a company called APR that are just down here in Alabama, and they were already providing like aftermarket ECU mapping there, which increased the boost and changed some of the other settings in there, and they were providing for that engine already over 300, I think 310 horsepower, and I think it was 510 foot-pounds of torque or something like that, which was totally acceptable because they're at continental levels, for takeoff level. So I thought, well, if they can do that like that with the standard turbo on there, and I put like a larger turbo on there, I can get 350 horsepower out of this engine all day long. So it was a good choice, and of course I put all that up on the website, and that's why everybody got excited. And that's why I was able to go and start the whole idea of having people put deposits in escrow. And so that really got the ball rolling. And then I think I started in May of that year, was it May, or I think it was a bit earlier actually, of 2015, started taking deposits in escrow. And when I had about 100 deposits in escrow, I was trying to think about, well, how am I going to fund this whole thing? And I didn't want to go out and get like one investor to go and fund this, because if I had one investor to fund this, chances are that person may kind of like lose interest a couple of years in if it took too long, like it has. Obviously I didn't think it was going to take this long to get where we are, but you know how it is, everything takes twice as long and costs 3 times as much. So we are where we are, but we've managed to get here this way anyway. Sorry about that, my camera got a bit warm and decided to shut down. This is actually a new camera that I'm using that I haven't actually used yet. It's a little Sony 5100. So anyway, as I was saying with the engine, let's see where I was at. Yeah, we're talking about the diesel engine, and yeah, how we're funding it. So yeah, I started taking the deposits there, and in escrow, and then trying to figure out how to fund it. I didn't want to have just one person funding it, because they may lose interest and then pull the plug halfway through, and then you just wasted your time and a couple of years or whatever, and people's money or whatever. And I've seen that happen before, so I didn't want to be in that boat. And then I started looking at maybe doing like maybe a dozen people, so you're kind of spreading the load a little bit. And it may be 50,000 each to get started. And I talked to a few people on that, and even at that level they were kind of like, sound like they wanted to really take control of things, and I didn't want to have 12 people fighting over what was going on. That was just going to be craziness, and I didn't want to be involved with that. So I just floated the idea, well, let's see if I can raise $20,000 from a handful of people to start with, and just put it in the bank to start with, and just see if that works. And so I reached out to the 100 or so people that had already put in a deposit in escrow, and pretty much, as I reached out to those people, about 20% of them decided they wanted to do that. So obviously there's people out there that were, so excited about what I was trying to do here that they're willing to, put in $20,000 of their hard-earned cash to, move the project forward. And so, when I had some money in the bank, was basically about $180,000. I thought, well, there's enough money that I can get started. I can get a shop open, and we can, start getting some stuff machined and move forward with the whole project. So I, at that point, just basically pulled the trigger and moved from California out here to Georgia, and brought Jeff on board and said, okay, this is it, we're starting, we're doing it. And we were going to get another guy up in Illinois to do the machining for us with a CNC, but Jeff quickly said that we were much better off just getting our own machine and figuring out how to use it for the amount of molds and stuff that we were going to do. So we ended up doing that, purchasing a machine with some of the money. We spent about $90,000 on that machine and moved it from Colorado, and then got out here. So, and that's kind of what's been happening ever since. So I funded the whole project just by reaching out again to those people, and out of the 1,500 deposits I have in there, I've reached out to the first 900 or so. And most of you guys know, because you've received an invitation letter from me to be part of that program. And so out of the 900 that I've reached out to so far, 134 I think it is now, or 135 have stepped up and put $20,000 up. And that's how we've done it. So we've basically spent $2.7 million on this project so far, and I think that's fairly reasonable for coming up on almost 4 years of doing this, and getting to the point where we are. And you've been watching the videos and that we've had problems along the way, and we just worked through them and solved them. But if we hadn't had chosen the Audi engine, this would have never happened. Just there wouldn't have been the interest in there. So there's a good reason for choosing that engine. At the time that I chose that engine, I didn't know anything about getting that engine together. I thought I was just going to get some other shop to do it, and they would get it all sorted out for us, and we'd have this engine all running. I knew it would take a long time. I was fully expecting, and that's as soon as we moved out here, or I moved out here to Georgia, the first thing I did was went and purchased that engine, just purchased a used one. So the engine that we have is out of a 2014 Audi Q7 that was in an accident. It was hit in the back, and so the whole car was parted out, and that engine ended up being at a wreckers there, and just all the accessories and everything off of it. And I purchased it for, I think it was $3,500 or $5,000. I can't remember now. It was somewhere around there. It wasn't a lot of money, and I only had 8,000 miles on it, and it went about from there trying to find some different shops that would be interested in building it up and putting the turbos back on and alternator and all that sort of stuff, and getting it all as a running engine on a stand that I could ultimately mate up to the aircraft later on. So that's the reason why we have that engine. And the Motec ECU that we have on there was basically a best choice for an aftermarket ECU that we could program it and do whatever we wanted to it, as opposed to just plugging in the original Audi ECU, which would not have run because it would have required so many other different sensors that are part of the vehicle that it just wouldn't have fired up the engine, and we would have had no way of getting in, because it's all proprietary. There's no way of getting in there and trying to change it to get it to run. Even those guys at APR, I don't think that they're they have full support from Audi for what they're doing with reprogramming the ECU down there. I don't know how they go about doing it, but I'm pretty sure Audi doesn't support what they're doing, because they're pretty much hacking in and changing the programming on their ECUs. So anyway, that's the reason why we have that engine. And at the time, I wasn't even thinking about dual FADEC ECUs. I was just thinking about, let's get a diesel engine in there that's going to be economical to run and produce plenty of power, and be also cheap to buy, because I know over in Europe you can buy those engines all day long. There's used ones, just containerfuls of them sitting over there, because so many cars over there have those engines. And when they're in an accident in a car and they get parted out and they're only a couple of years old, there's no reason for anybody to go and want to buy one of those engines at this point. So the companies over there, they stockpile those engines for future use later on. So there's tons of them over there now. You could actually go and buy them all day long. So I knew there'd be a good supply of them. We can just have them ship a container load of them over to use in the aircraft. But again, that would all depend on whether Audi tried to stop us or whatever. But on a used engine, maybe they won't be able to stop us. Who knows? Anyway, there's other engine options out there as well that are coming down the track. There's a guy out in Japan who's doing a diesel engine. There's the APS guys up there in Wisconsin, I believe. And for two different diesel engines. There's other turboprop companies that are out there that are smaller turboprop. So there's all kinds of different engine choices. But the fact is that none of these other diesel engines are available right now. They're not operating. I can't get one right now. And I've got one on here that actually I've managed to get working, and it runs, and it actually runs great. So while I've been waiting for all those guys to get their engine, I was thinking, well, maybe they'll get one by the time we're ready to fly. But at least I'll have something if they're not ready. And here we are. We're ready. They're not. I've got an engine that will run, they don't, And the turboprop engine, the little one from Europe somewhere, I could put that on there and that, but then it's going to suck all this fuel. It's just not going to be cool anymore, because it's just going to be, cost a lot of money to run. So, I have a very good reason for sticking with this engine the amount of time that I have, but knowing full well that if it didn't work out in the future, we could change to something else. But now we're here, and we're ready to fly, I've got that engine on there, and I'm confident in it because I've run it on the test stand and I've taken it through all different power settings and, you know, run it for hours on end. You know, I ended up putting 20 something hours on it. I know that's not a lot, but you know, when it's running for 2.5 hours straight and it doesn't even make a burp, you know, it just runs and runs and runs and runs. You're like, well, how much longer do I run it before, you know, to find if there's a problem in it? You know, it's not, you know, 20 hours to me is like, that's a lot of hours if nothing happens along the way. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at with that engine. And so, I mean, at this point, I have to pretty much stick with this engine. And, you know, obviously, everybody said, you know, new engine and new airframe, bad combination, you know. And I fully understood that. I said, but at the same time, if I was to have just said, oh, we're just going to put a Continental engine in this to start with, I would have spent years doing that and then all of a sudden have to pull it all out again and go and start with the Audi engine. You couldn't do both at the same time. And if you had to put the Continental engine on there right now, it would take probably a year to do it, because you've got to pull this guy out, you've got to re-engineer where the Continental engine's going to fit. You may even have to move that aft bulkhead forward a little bit because of the weight of the engine there, or you may have to, you know, create a different style of engine mount, and then you have to hook up all the controls for it, and then you have to worry about your cowling. I mean, it's just not the sort of thing that you just do overnight. It's a big project, and to be perfectly honest with you, I don't have the interest in doing that. I don't have the energy to do that, because to me it's like a dead end. It's like, why spend all that time putting that engine in there if you don't want it to be in there? It's like, it's just craziness, you know. I'd rather have the Audi engine in there and figure out a way to, you know, test it in to make somebody feel comfortable enough to actually try it. So anyway, that's my take on it. And having 4 years into, you know, almost 4 years into being here, and you know, for me personally, I moved out from California. I was there with friends, and you know, from Australia, I don't have any family in the US. I really came out here with the mindset of like, this is a project. I'm going to be focused on this project. There's not going to be a lot of social life or anything like that. And I thought it would only take maybe 2 years, maybe 2.5 years to get this done. And so here we're coming up on 4 years, because I moved out here in the middle of August of 2015. We're coming up on 4 years. And, you know, I don't have a social life out here. I have very few. I mean, I don't even have any like friends that I hang out with. Obviously don't have any family. I don't get much time to go and spend. I've been back to Australia one time and been back to California one time in that 4 years. So to me, this has been like very difficult, you know, because I feel very isolated out here. It's not my home, and it's not even where I spend a lot of time and have a lot of friends like I do in California. So it's to the point there where I'm like, you know, I put my all into this thing, and if I can't find somebody who is going to be able to test this engine and test the airframe, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I may have to just park the aircraft here in the hangar in the corner until I can figure out what the next step is going to be. And if that means that, you know, I literally can't find a pilot who's willing to fly it with the configuration it has, I may have to, you know, hand the project over to somebody else who wants to go to the trouble of pulling that engine out, putting another, you know, proven Continental engine in it or whatever, and then, you know, solving the other issues, getting that flying, and then pulling that engine off and putting the Audi back on, and then going from there. So anyway, that's kind of the mindset where I'm at right now. I wanted to kind of relay this to you. This is all the different things that are going on in my head. So what's going to happen right now, at least this is what I'm thinking, and you know, this is Sunday here. I'm at the hangar again. I was here 10 hours yesterday, and of course all the way through the week. I haven't really had a weekend at all, so I'm going to take probably tomorrow off and maybe even Tuesday off, just to, you know, get my head back around myself right now, because I'm just, you know, completely exhausted with all this. And now I've still got to go right now, once I finish this, is go and pick up this tug to move this aircraft around. I purchased a used tug for a really good deal, but it's an hour away, so I have to go and pick up a pickup U-Haul truck to go and get it, and drive an hour to go and get it, and drive another hour back and drop it off here. So I've still got stuff to do, so it's exhausting. So anyway, but my goal is, or my plan is here, is to get the flight controls, to finish rigging the flight controls, to tune those in, and, you know, do some of the things that Len has recommended, that you know, the quick sort of things that I can do. And then in between doing all that, get this thing out on the runway out there once I have rudder control authority, because I want to be able to sort of have some sort of steerable authority up to about 50 knots, and then slowly start taking the aircraft up in, step after step, different runs to about 50 knots, maybe 55 knots, and obviously with a lot of ballast in the nose, because I have no intention of trying to fly this aircraft, but I want to prove that the engine has the thrust available to take it down the runway in a short enough distance that you'd be able to get it airborne, fly it in ground effect, and then land it again and have enough room to stop. So my goal is going to be just to start slowly, and I've already, on the other side of the runway, when I've taken it out over there, I've already had it up to 25 knots. At least that was the indicated ground speed with the GPS, because the pitot tube wasn't hooked up at the time. And that wasn't even, that was just taking the throttle to not even half throttle. And again, I wasn't doing it very quickly, but I'm going to take it out there and I'll video the whole thing, because I want to have proof to show that, here I'm starting out, this is how much distance it took, how much time it took, and then I can use some calculators to figure out exactly, how much thrust we're producing, and use, some extrapolation to figure out, how long it would take or how much distance it's going to take to get to, to rotation speed. And then also how the engine's performing at those sort of levels. Does it look like the EGTs are going to spike and that sort of stuff? I mean, basically take it as far as that I can take it that's safe, without trying to actually get it off the ground. And then at that point, I'm going to sort of sit back and say, well, can I find a pilot, or have I already found a pilot who is willing to fly the aircraft? Have we resolved these other aerodynamic issues and all the other little things that we still need to be done? And this is probably going to take, it may take several months to do it. And the lease, I'm just renting an apartment right now. The lease that I have on that apartment is expires on July 11th. And I didn't want to extend it for, I was hoping to be basically done and out of here then, on my way up to Oshkosh soon after that. So, I can't renew that lease now, because I've already rented my apartment to somebody else, and I don't want to go and take on another year-long lease. So I'll probably, while I'm here, I'll probably just be doing Airbnbs while I'm working on doing the little fixes and stuff. And also too, we actually have the new prop shaft is already being machined up north here at the machine shop that we've been using, so we can get this new oil shuttle working for the redrive. So that'll probably be finished soon around the time of Oshkosh, the end of July. And so that'll be one of the things that I'd like to sort of, get that plugged in and replaced and make sure that that's all working. And also too, my head's gone around a bunch of different ways, and I'm trying to explain all this to you and get it all out before my camera overheats again. So Jeff and Devon are probably going to be moving on here, and Jeff has his own shop and doing his own thing. They're probably going to be moving on here in the next couple of weeks, after we've just buttoned up whatever else we can button up that needs to be done. And then after that, it's just going to be me, and unless I find another hand or whatever. But it'll probably be a point where I'll get to a stage where there isn't really anything else I can do. I'll be waiting on the prop shaft and the oil shuttle for the redrive, so I can get the constant speed prop working. And maybe I'll just go back to my place in Arkansas for a little bit, take a break. And but at the same time, the other thing I need to think about too is my funds. I've got a certain amount of money sitting in the bank, enough to last probably a month or two, and then I need to think about, well, is somebody else going to, out of that 900 or so, or the 1,500 people, is somebody else going to want to step up and put their $20,000 in with such a risk that we have, that we may not be able to find a test pilot, and the project may blow out for a lot longer. And for those of you who have already put your money in there, believe me, this is all sitting here, and it's all worth a lot. I have a lot of interest in this aircraft. And there's companies out there that, we want your aircraft, we want to put our own engine in, but we want your aircraft. So if for some reason we have to sell this whole project, believe me, I'm going to make sure that you guys all get your money back out through this thing. There's a lot of information involved in this whole thing, a lot of technology and IP that it took a long time to figure out, and it's worth a lot of money. So but anyway, going forward, I do actually have a very interesting idea for production for this aircraft, which I haven't alluded to yet. that would be completely different than what I've been, talking about up until now. But it all depends on getting this thing flying. So, I don't want to go and reveal any details of those ideas until I've got a proven aircraft. But if I can get this aircraft proven, then that would be a very exciting information for everybody out there to know kind of what I'm planning on doing with taking this into production. But again, it's just too early to even start dropping any sort of hints about what that would be until we have an aircraft that's proven. So anyway, I guess there's probably more that I forgot to tell you about this, and this video is probably way too long as it is. But anyway, there's a lot of information I wanted to just get out there, and just so you guys know what's going on and where things are headed. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people, oh, I told you so, and blah blah blah. And sure, and there's also going to be a lot of people like, come on, you can do it. And I believe that we can do it too, and I have every confidence in that engine myself. And if the airframe was proven, and I knew that it actually flew okay, I would be quite happy to go and fly it with that engine on there. That's the sort of confidence that I have in that engine. But I'm not a test pilot. I don't know how to handle this aircraft if something went wrong, and so there's no way that I'm going to be the person doing that. Now, if somebody has confidence in the engine and they know how to test pilot the aircraft as a test pilot should, that's the person to fly it, So I guess that's about everything I wanted to cover. Yeah, and I guess the camera got too hot again, so I did talk too long. Anyway, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover there. And as I was saying, I think a lot of people are going to have comments and stuff to say on this video. And I'll keep putting out the videos, just twice a week showing what's going on, because it's obviously super interesting and super exciting to see it when when I'm out there taxiing it on the runway and doing some power runs and things like that. But the future is a little bit uncertain right now, and definitely not going to take the aircraft to Oshkosh. It's just not. There's no way. It's not going to happen now. But I'll keep plugging away. I'll be reaching out to other test pilots out there to see, and if other people have recommendations, I'm sure I'm going to get the same names coming up again. There's probably about 4 or 5 names that are going to keep popping up. So I'll reach out to all those guys and see what they have to say, and if we can find someone who is not just a crazy cowboy, and has a good reason why they feel confident in the engine, and they're willing to test the aircraft once we resolve, or at least have some more input on the potential issues with the larger winglet and the elevator control. Then we'll have a test pilot fly it. Other than that, just keep following along and see what happens. And sorry this video was so long, but now you guys are totally informed and you have quite a good backstory on what's been going on here. I don't think I've left out very much in what's going on. It's been a fun ride so far, but man, I tell you, I'm just kind of exhausted. So I'm going to take the day off and just trying to recover a little bit, and then I'll be back at it, and hopefully have this thing out on the runway here before the end of this week, and have some performance numbers a little bit, just to show how long it takes to get up to speed, and we'll go from there. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for sticking with it through this long video, and if you stuck to the end, man, you're a trooper. Alright, we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.